Morning everybody, and welcome to Monday's edition of Indycar. My name's Gordon Ross, and today I wanted to talk to you about yet another Scottish natural resource or infrastructure project which is currently in danger. It's threatened with closure or sale, and it's one which most people don't realise was even sold off to somebody else, to private owners. During the 1980s, when the Conservative government decided to sell off all of Scotland's steelmaking, shipbuilding, close its mines and so forth, and basically just shut down all the heavy industries in Scotland, the Thatcher government held what was known as a fire sale of all of the land which was occupied by shipbuilding on the upper and lower reaches of the Clyde. They sold off the shipyards, the dry docks, the harbours, the shipbuilding facilities from Govan all the way down to Greenock, past Port Glasgow, all the way down to Greenock to Inverkip. Everything was sold. All of the land, all of the real estate that belonged to the shipyards and the shipbuilding industry in Scotland on the Clyde was sold to the highest bidder. And nothing more was thought about it until very recently. Now, the only bit of real estate which is still in the hands of a shipbuilding company on the Clyde is in fact the Ferguson's yard at Port Glasgow, which is still owned by Ferguson's, rescued by Jim McCall a few years ago, and is now building beautiful new hybrid ferries and low carbon emission ferries for both the Scottish government and for other countries around the world. It's a big success story. But the problem is that in Greenock at the moment there are a number of refit yards, dry docks and other facilities which are owned by this foreign national, by a tax exile, who has plans to sell one of the dry docks in Greenock, which is the largest of its type in Scotland and is used normally for bringing in large ships to be refitted, repainted, to have their engines fixed and so forth. It's a major maintenance and refit facility on the Scottish west coast. It's the only one of its type that's large enough to accept the kind of contracts which would bring in large ships and large amounts of money. It's threatened with closure and sale at the moment by its current owners. Now the problem is this. You've heard me talk in the past about how angry I get about the fact that the River Clyde as a port is empty, it's dead. Nothing moves, hardly any traffic moves on the Clyde anymore. There is a limited amount of shipping which brings in gravel, brings in cement, and brings in timber, but it's very small beer compared with what it used to be. And you'll see vast areas of wharves and harbour land on the riverfront in Glasgow which is derelict, just masses of expanse of hard scrabble land with nothing on it. It's an eyesore, it's a waste of land, but it doesn't belong to Scotland. It belongs to this offshore tax exile who lives abroad, who bought it for a song from the Thatcher government and now is trying to sell bits of it off for housing development and lose these fantastic facilities down in Greenock, which are the last of their kind anywhere in Scotland that are large enough to refit civilian ships of any kind of size. Now, why am I getting annoyed about this? Well, a number of people in the past 2 or 3 months have mentioned this to me, that there is this threat to this dry dock in Greenock. I will get more information on it for you for a future broadcast, but I thought I would start the ball rolling today by bringing this to people's attention. It's important for a number of reasons. One is that when Scotland is independent, it will need every resource that it has, both in shipbuilding, ship refitting, harbours, wharfs, container terminals. It will need all of these things, and the whole of the upper Clyde and lower Clyde will need to be brought back into use so that the central belt of Scotland can be supplied with the imports that it should be getting through its own ports, but isn't because they're coming through English ports most of the time. There is some traffic comes through Grangemouth, but it's largely to do with oil and gas for obvious reasons, because Grangemouth is a petrochemicals plant. So Scotland needs this port and it needs this facility. If it's sold and if that dry dock is lost and filled in and turned into tract housing, then we'll have lost a key element of what Scotland needs for its future shipbuilding industry. It needs these large dry docks for both the assembly and for the repair of large-scale ships. I'm not talking military ships here. That's the job of BAE Systems on the Clyde. Now, BAE Systems, believe it or not, are also beholden to this offshore company, because one of their yards, the one in Govan, that land is also owned by this offshore tax exile. And because of that, only the Scotstoun yard on the north side, the north bank of the Clyde, is actually owned by BAE Systems. It used to be, I think it was John Brown's yard. I'll need to check that. But the point is that it's the only yard on the Upper Clyde which is actually privately owned, is that one in Scotstoun. So we've got one in Scotstoun, we have got one in Port Glasgow, and that is it. The rest of it is all owned by a foreign national who could do what the hell he likes with it, and Scotland would lose it forever. So what I'm saying to you today, and what's being said to me by various people who live down in Greenock and Inverclyde who are concerned about this, is that they would like the Scottish Government to purchase that dry dock, the one that they're trying to sell at the moment, to buy it up for the country and to keep it open and to keep it functional for when we're independent. Because once it's lost, it's very difficult to get back that kind of facility. There are two other derelict dry docks in Govan, the ones that are adjacent to the Science Centre Tower. You've probably seen them, look like an artificial island that was just covered in hard scrabble and rats and foxes infested area. Those two dry docks still have pumps, I believe, on site, and could be rebuilt and reused if there was the will to do it and the investment to do it. So what I'm saying today is that we think we should really start to make a bit of noise about this and get the SNP government to have a look at this dry dock in Greenock and see if it can be saved for the nation, instead of being sold off to a housing developer, never to be able to be used again. To me, it's largely an industrial site anyway, and I think it would be difficult to rework it into something for commercial or domestic use. They might manage to build another shopping centre, but do we really need another shopping centre in the west of Scotland? I don't think so. So my point is that because the Scottish Government has done this in the past, they have bought up critical real estate, critical industrial infrastructure. They bought up Prestwick Airport to keep it for the nation and to keep it running, and they're doing that. They bought up the aluminium smelter and the steelworks, which were then sold on to new owners who are now running them at a profit, who are now running them and expanding them, particularly the aluminium smelter, which is destined to become a massive automotive wheel factory in future. So the investment is going in, the Scottish Government is getting this right. Can they get it right with this dry dock as well, and find a way of keeping it for the country, maybe selling it on to somebody like perhaps Ferguson's, who might be able to operate it as a construction yard for some of the larger ships. But whatever they do, it's important to make sure that these facilities on the Lower Clyde are kept. They're a national resource. We don't want them to go into oblivion like so many other industrial sites in Scotland have just become either tract housing or shopping centres. And there's enough shopping centres in Scotland as it is without adding more to it. So that's what the programme is about today. Let's see if we can save the lower Clyde yards in Greenock from closure and from redevelopment, and keep them for the nation for when we're independent and when we need them. I suspect that Jim McCall at Ferguson's might be interested in keeping this particular part of the Greenock yards open, because it's a large, massive dry dock. They could use it to build extremely large ferries, the kind of ferries which could be used in the Mediterranean or for other longer haul type passenger trips, or even car ferries of a larger size. But it's a big facility. It has cranes, it has pumps, it has the facilities to service and build much larger ships. And that's something which at the moment Ferguson's lack the space to do. So that's the point of the show today. Let's save that dry dock down in Greenock from destruction and from being filled in and used for something else. One last item before I leave you today. We heard yesterday that the the education minister of Catalonia, who has fled to Scotland, been given a job at St Andrews University as a professor, has now had an extradition warrant issued by the Spanish government through the European Union and Interpol. And the Scottish Police Service and Scottish law enforcement have now been obliged to act on this. So this poor lady has now had to give herself up to the Scottish Police. Amar Anwar has been appointed as her representative, as her solicitor. And he, being a human rights solicitor, will now claim, quite rightly, that this poor woman is going to be persecuted, that she's going to be degraded and imprisoned if she goes back home for nothing more than exercising her democratic rights as a politician in her own devolved assembly, in a legal ballot in which millions of people voted for Catalonia to become independent, and which was then ruthlessly and brutally put down by the Spanish stormtroopers, who they threatened to do this if people voted, that they would go in with violence. They threatened violence if people attempted to vote. That's just completely unacceptable. And now the Spanish government is trying to take action through the European courts and Scottish courts to imprison people who really don't belong in prison. Just politicians who are trying to do their best to represent the people who have elected them, and who have been elected time upon number, repeatedly in majority. The people of Catalonia have expressed their preference to be independent several times, and it's being denied by a very ruthless, almost fascist state in Spain. The Scottish government is powerless to do much about it other than to comply with it under duress, because the British government has overall control over extradition warrants. We have no legal control over it. However, the woman has a right to fight her extradition and to appeal it through the Scottish court system. And I believe the Scottish court system will hear her appeal very sympathetically. It would appear that the German courts now have come down in favour of the Catalan exiles and said that they will not extradite them too. Whereas I'm very glad the Germans have done this, because I was worried that this was going to go the other way and Germany was going to be seen as yet another accessory after the fact to this fascist state. So I'm hoping that the Scottish judiciary will see things in a similar way and will do the right thing and refuse the extradition, based on the fact that this poor woman's human rights will be trampled underfoot if she goes back to Spain. She'll be thrown in jail, she'll be degraded and treated badly, her life will be ruined, her job will be lost, and her human rights will have been completely ignored by the Spanish state. So that's where the news is today. We have a job to do to save a vital piece of shipbuilding infrastructure down in Greenock, and we have a refugee to protect. A lady who will be persecuted if she returns home, and I think that is reason enough to offer sanctuary to her here in Scotland and to refuse the extradition. Have a good day, everybody. I'll see you later. As usual, contact me after the show if you have anything else you want to tell me, any suggestions for future shows. I'll speak to you later in the week. Bye for now.